just having a look through here, just sort of just see what we've got. So we've got how to balance teaching with PGCE, not having free time, it's having to create all lesson PowerPoints from scratch. Someone's commented about PGCE, childcare, managing that with work, teaching admin with assignments, which is also, I suppose, kind of commenting on that PGCE point, taking work home, working on the weekends, managing assignments. I've found part-time work in my degree hard enough, completely valid. Having enough time to do everything to a good standard, that's a really important one, I think. Not having free time, falling behind with teaching responsibilities, creating effective PowerPoints. Procrastination, I can really relate to that. How to sort of balance that work, managing everything with a family. Yeah, completely, absolutely valid. Yeah, so we've got lots of different lots of things around planning. There's a few things around childcare. There's some things around you know, just making sure that time is spent. And I guess another one coming through is different things, competing deadlines, and also getting things done to a good standard. Thank you so much. So I'm going to unshare this for a moment and just so it's just loading up now. But myself and sorry, so I've got it's me, Leo Wax, and now my colleagues Alice and Isabella are here today. They've just given you some waves, and what we wanted to use that mentee to do was kind of just get everything out on the table, and looking through it, they're very much what we thought would be the worries and be the concerns. And we're not necessarily going to be able to solve all of those today. But what we are going to try and do is give you a bit of an insight into what managing workload is going to be like, with a particular focus on that first term. And hopefully also give you some things that you can take away to use when you actually get to school, in order to make sure that you are not only like making sure you get everything done, but also that you are looked after, taken care of, and that your well-being is in a good kind of state. So hopefully we're going to address all of the things that we've come back today, and we'll come back to them at the end. And if there's anything that we haven't, we'll make sure we comment on it. Lovely. So workload, it is it's very much a buzzword in teaching. You might have seen things in the media about workload. You might have read different articles, you know, talking about teaching workload, talking about teacher burnout. It's a very common theme, and it's something that is spoken about within the education circle a lot. And my guess would be that if you've come to this session, it's something that you've either thought about, and this came through on the mentee as well. Perhaps some people are thinking, well, I've struggled in my degree, so how am I going to actually work in a school and do this effectively? So yeah, everyone is here with a kind of shared, I suppose, concern or worry about this. Something to say is that it's really normal. It's really, really normal to have these worries. We, like a lot of people, and myself included, who did the Teach First program, I also went into the program with these worries, thinking, I've never, it was my first professional job as well. Like I've never done these things before. The good thing is that you can learn. There are techniques you can use, and you know, there's a lot of people that go into the classroom not necessarily knowing what to do, and they learn and they get better. And it's a lot of it is to do with practice. So think the first thing to think about is why managing your workload is such an important part of being a teacher. Um, Something that people did comment on in the Menti, which I'm happy that you did, was that there's lots of different things that you're juggling when you're a teacher. And because sometimes of the nature of the role, that's not necessarily just things in school. You know, a lot of people have spoken about out of school responsibilities, you know, childcare, etc. Even as someone, you know, for the people that are joining us today who are maybe in their final year of university, you're still going to be juggling things in your life, you know, like making sure that you do exercise, making sure that you see your friends, etc. So it's lots of different things to juggle. And the reason why it's so important that you put things into place to handle that, to manage that, is because ultimately, as a teacher, you being in the room and being present is the most important thing. So you could have, you know, you could have the best lessons, you could have the best resources, everything can be amazing. But if you haven't, you know, if you've gone to bed really late and you haven't slept well, or if you've been kept up all night because you've been really stressed, the impact is going to be felt by the young people that you're working with. And it might also be felt by your colleagues because perhaps they might have to step in with things that you can't handle. But mostly it's going to be felt by you because you're not going to be able to, you know, do your job to the best of your ability if we don't manage that workload and put those things into place that will help you to manage all that. Something we really wanted to point out as well is that we're not expecting you to come into the program and know everything to do. And that's why there are so many avenues of support that you can go down. So we've put some of these on here. I suppose another one, which I didn't put on there, is that you've come to this session, and that's a really good first step. So hopefully that will give you some tools. When you're on the program, every single person here will be assigned a school mentor in your school. Usually you meet with them once a week, and they're usually quite an experienced member of staff. So they're going to have been in your shoes before. They're going to have known that when you come into this profession, sometimes it's difficult to know how to juggle everything. So we really want to encourage you to call upon those people to ask for the support that you need. And your in-school mentor you'll see on a daily basis. Development leads, everyone will have development leads that work at Teach First. And they're also people that are really valuable resource, and don't feel like you can't tell them, look, I'm struggling, I'm not sure what to do. They really, really will be able to support you with that, particularly as they're people that, you know, that's their job to support you. Another thing to say is that your peers. So one of the amazing things about Teach First is that you get to go through this journey with so many people in the same boat, and people might, you know, you might be able to share techniques. How did you manage to speed up how you plan that lesson? Oh, well, I did it like this, I did it like that. And leaning on each other is really important. And finally, there's obviously, you all know, there's so much on the internet now. There's so many things you can find. And, you know, if you can think of it, someone's probably already researched it or Googled it. So there's lots of things that you can find out there, and hopefully lots of helpful things as well. I'm going to hand over to Alice.
I'm Alice. I'm an early talent associate at Teach First. Glad to be here. Glad to be helping out. So the first question that I'm going to ask you all is, what does being disorganized look like? So I'm just going to ask you guys to write your examples, your answers in the chat. Some examples I could give is missing deadlines, double booking yourself, forgetting things. So I'm going to give you guys a second just to write your ideas down, and then we can share a few out. Yeah, poor time management, not completing work, stress, having to work late, being late, no to-do list, burnout, losing things, True. Meeting deadlines, but to a poor standard, that's a really good one. Feeling stressed with the deadline. These are all great, and these are all exactly examples of being disorganized. You can also say, yeah, feeling overwhelmed, prioritizing, not knowing what's coming next in your schedule, in your week, things like that. Those are all ways of being disorganized. Leaving things for the last minute. These are all very true. These are all things that we all know. Right. Not communicating effectively about what hasn't been done. That's really important, especially when you're working in a school, you're working with so many people and your students as well. So communicating effectively is so important. All right, fantastic. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so yes, perfect. So on top of that, it's also what prevents you from being organized. So it's not just about being disorganized, it's about what might prevent you from being able to do that yourself. And so these are also like really important things to consider, because you can't just say, oh, today I'm just going to be organized. That's not really possible. So same thing, just type in chat. What kind of prevents you from being able to do these things? Procrastination, that's a huge one. Taking on too much. Burnout, lack of resources, lack of sleep, just as Leo was talking about earlier, time constraints, the unexpected. That's huge. Not being able to say no. Oh, I'm just like that. Build-up of tasks, a lot of deadlines at one time. We all had that at university. Do understand that. Not keeping a diary or a schedule, procrastination again, not planning things. Yeah, these are all really, really good points. Yeah. It's actually really interesting, because I think that some people think to themselves like, oh, maybe I'm just not an organized person. But that's not really true. Organization isn't just an inherent thing that we all have. It's something that we can plan to do. It's something that we can work on effectively. It's something that we have the tools around us to be able to help us with. And so being able to be like, okay, if I work effectively and I do specific things and I keep a list of, to-do list or other stuff like that, you can be an organized person. So that's really important to remember and to be able to feel when you're getting into this. Okay, great. These are all really, really true and all really important things. Anxiety from observations, lack of consistency, lack of motivation. Yeah, this is true. All right, we'll go to the next one. So yeah, so these are ways that you can prioritize your tasks. So you can prioritize tasks in multiple different ways. So based on the urgency of the task that you have to do, the importance, the impact that it might have on your class, yourself, the people around you, your colleagues, things like that. The amount of time that it might take you to do something is also really important to look at. So if you have a task that can go really quick, or if you have a task that you think is going to take you longer, being able to like really reasonably make those decisions for yourself about how much time you're going to set aside for specific things is really important, and not, pretending like it's not going to take you any time at all when it might take you a long time. Being realistic about that is really important. And also what you enjoy the most and what you enjoy the least. So something that's really important is that if you have tasks that you really don't want to do, interspersing those with tasks that you really love doing is really important, because otherwise, if you're just doing things all in a row that you don't necessarily want to do, that can really be detrimental to your motivation. So being able to kind of do these things side by side or interspersing them can be really, really helpful to your motivation doing tasks. Right, so now we're going to watch a little video on the Eisenhower matrix. Just to say on the Eisenhower matrix, Also, it's very funny that I'm the American in the room and I'm talking about Eisenhower. But it's really, really important to use because when you place your tasks in a traditional to-do list, it can feel really overwhelming because everything looks to be the same importance or the same urgency when that's not really the case. And when you first start using the Eisenhower matrix, it might be really easy just to put everything into quadrant 1 because it might feel like everything is really important and everything is really urgent. So it's really important to look at all of your tasks slowly and methodically and work with the people around you to see where you can realistically put everything. So not everything will be as important or as urgent as it might feel in the beginning. And it might sound really cheesy, but both of my parents who are university professors actually use the Eisenhower matrix to be able to handle their day-to-day workload. So it does really work. And managing your tasks is a learning curve, and you'll get better at using the Eisenhower matrix as a to-do list, like as you use it. And I promise it's very, very helpful. So yeah, so now we're going to move on to what it means to eat the frog. I love this saying. I just think it's so funny. But as Mark Twain once said, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. So the frog is the one thing that you have on your to-do list that you have absolutely no motivation to do and that you're most likely to procrastinate on. So eating the frog means to just do it. Otherwise, the frog that will eat you, meaning that you'll end up procrastinating the whole day and it will just take over your life in a sense. So once that task is done, then you have the rest of the day not to worry about it. So like this can happen all over your life. Like for me, it's doing the dishes right after I cook, like being able to do that is me eating the frog and not leaving them in the sink until the next day when, I'll be thinking about it like, oh, I have to do the dishes tomorrow morning. And so that can feed into your work life as well. If you don't want to send an email, but like, you know what, that you really should just do it first, get it out of the way, and then you won't think about it. So that's a really important thing as well, just to have in your pocket to eat that frog. Yeah.
Just to quickly come in on that before pass over to Isabella, I was just going to say that from my experience in the classroom, my eating the frog was very much sort of things like if I had to do marking, if I had like a big stack of marking from an assessment, I knew that if I was to say I'm going to do it at the end of the day, for me, that just wouldn't work. So I would come into school a bit early and just block out like an hour and just get a big chunk of it done. And that was really helpful in terms of kind of like managing my workload. Yeah, I'm going to pass over to Isabella.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I work for the Experienced Hires, part of Teach First, and yeah, I've just got a couple of different ideas. Some of these might sound really simple to you, but it's always good just to refresh and kind of go from there. So one of the first things that you could do is using a Pomodoro timer. So especially when you're doing your university tasks, setting out spaces that you can do things, realistic chunks of the tasks. Also, you are in your first year. Do not be afraid to ask for help. Your school know that you're a trainee. Everybody around you knows that you're a trainee. Your development lead is there to support you. Ask them for help. Do not be afraid to communicate that. The more that you sort of hold that in, the bigger the sort of blowout will be when later on that you get through everything. Another tip that colleagues of mine and friends of mine have used in teaching is setting mini deadlines. If you're somebody who likes to leave everything to the last minute, this is great because then you kind of keep yourself going, keep that momentum going, and you don't lead yourself end up to burnout, and it can just help with your mental health as well. Another big one is making sure you separate your time, your work to your playtime. So again, a teacher that went through the program last year, they commented on how what they do now is every Friday there's a staff session where they go out and play football or they do something along those lines or go to the pub, and then they just have a vent. And make sure that they ask, again, this comes through the asking for help, but it comes through the making sure you know what's going on. And again, it just makes sure that you're aware of the environment that you're in and knowing that you're on the right track, because sometimes it can get really easy to get swamped by everything. This one, we've already discussed this from Alice, doing to-do lists, whichever way this works for you, if it's online, if it's on your calendar, if it's, a paper copy. I'm an old-fashioned person. I've got my book beneath my computer here. Everything has to be written down. But depending on how that works for you, just making sure you get one of these done at the start of each week, and reflect on it on Fridays. Usually for Teach First trainees, your Friday is your lightest day, so you probably won't have any classes that day, so it's a great day to reflect on everything that you've done and kind of just go through all of the advice that your development lead might have given you, or if you've had any lessons that have been monitored. Now, in regards to feedback, another thing is scan all your feedback from day one. This will really help you with your PGCE because everything will then be in one place for you to access instead of having it all over the place. Make sure you have it all scanned and all sorted from your development lead and from your school. Yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So as I've said, communicate your struggles, communicate with your team. That, again, you are a trainee. We're not expecting you to know everything, but you do know more than the students. Remember that. So when you're panicking and stressing, you know more than the students. You can get through your class, you can get through your lessons, you can get through your PGCE work. You've got this. So yes, there is a never-ending to-do list of being a teacher. So create strict deadlines for yourself. One of my past trainees, they have a really strict thing of the fact that as soon as it comes to 6 o'clock, they're leaving the school regardless. Doesn't matter if they haven't completed everything, they're going to leave everything at school and come home. And then that's kind of how they balance it because they've got children, so that's how they make sure, and then they go in the next day. Or another one is, again, from another trainee of mine, is every time they're on the train, they take their marking because they know that they've got a solid block on the train and they've got nowhere else to go, they've got nothing else to do, and they force themselves to sit down with a couple of snacks and do their marking all in one go. So, you know, you've definitely got those options to find yourself, whether or not you're at university at the moment or if you're an experienced hire, and just trying to balance your work life at the same time. And again, mental health and well-being is the most important thing. So please ensure that you look after yourself. Again, trainees of mine, they ended up going, you know, at the end of the day, they would go and buy themselves cookies from Tesco's or something like that to reward themselves, or you know, there would be something that they've got to do that would just make themselves feel a bit happier, a bit more lighthearted. And again, come back to the talking, communicate. I cannot reiterate that one so much more. So with all that knowledge, what I would like you to do, if you could take a photo or write down the question here, we're going to put you out into breakout rooms to just have a quick discussion on everything we've you know, of these questions, and we can come back and see how you've done. Just give us a couple of seconds to get the breakout rooms.
Hi everyone, I'm about to pop you into breakouts, so I'll put them down for about 5 minutes, just like Isabella explained, but I was just going to say, do make sure you come back after them, because we're then going to open to if anyone has any questions, and we can also just talk a little bit more about the scanning stuff, just so people aren't, you know, worrying about it, because nothing to worry about. But I will just do the rooms now. Hi everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much. So I hope that, I know it was very brief, but I hope that you had some helpful or interesting conversations with other people about like maybe things that you found useful or anything you think you might use when you start teaching. Something I'll say before we open for questions is just that I think it's very individual, and something that might work for you might not work for someone else, and that's absolutely fine. I, you know, definitely, I know people that work in just completely different ways from me, and particularly when I was in the classroom, and, you know, as long as you're getting everything done, that's the important thing. It doesn't really matter how you get there, as long as it works for you. So don't worry too much if you're, you know, about that aspect of things. So yes, what we'll do is we will open for questions. Feel free to either come off mute and say hello, and if you've got any questions. Alternatively, if you want to pop them in the chat, that's also fine. I think between the three of us, we'll hopefully have some answers for you. I think Great question, Victoria. One of which I'm not 100% sure of the answer. I think it's maybe I think it's, I'm not sure. I think it's between 2 to 4. What I will say about the assignments though is that something to consider, which is really helpful, is that they're quite like arranged around school holidays. So usually you don't really need to they can kind of like fit quite nicely into your holidays. I know, like, perhaps you're thinking, but I just want to have the holidays, but you have to do them at some point. And what I'll say as well about the PGCE assignments is that something that's really different about them compared to maybe for people that are currently at university, or people that obviously are maybe like a few years out, but like if you think back to when you were studying, they're quite different, because a lot of the stuff that you're going to be writing on is not going to be necessarily go to the library, read loads of different research. A lot of the stuff that you're writing about in your assignments is based on your own practice. So that's just easier to write about because it's writing about your own personal experience. So that's something to bear in mind. Timetable wise, it's quite hard to say what it would look like. I can just like sort of remember from my experience. I think in my first year I taught about 18 hours per week. You get more, they're called PPA, which is prep. I actually can't remember what it stands for now, which is embarrassing. Preparation. I don't know what it's called. A lot of people refer to it as a free period, but PPA is the more kind of like teaching term for it. And you get more of those in your first year, because there's more. You're obviously doing a PGCE, and also it just does take you longer to do everything when it's your first time to do it all. So you do get a bit more of an allowance for that. I can't remember the exact percentage, but as someone in your first year, you do that is obviously taken into consideration of your timetable. Different schools have different timetables, though. Some schools will have, so I taught, my first school had 6 lessons a day. The second school I taught in had 3 lessons a day, 3 quite long lessons, of like 100 minutes each. So it depends what like what school you're at and how they work. I'm just having a look at the other questions. How much can teachers of common subjects collaborate on lesson materials? I think, yeah, good question. I think probably it's something in your first year you might not focus on as much, because you'll be, really focused on sort of like, making sure you're hitting all the standards and getting through. But I think a lot of schools really welcome that kind of collaboration between subjects. And definitely, I think people are oftentimes very open to that kind of thing. So sounds cool. So just Jessica's question, I don't know if it's 80%. I think it's different between primary and secondary. It's just something I'll say. But in second year, I know you go up slightly in terms of your teaching time. In your first ECT year, so you do have a bit more teaching time. I'm just going to have a look to see. Oh, thank you, Chantal. Planning. Oh, thank you, Amy, as well. Oh, lots of people said it. Great. Thank you. When your mind just goes blank. Nusrat, the Teach First is affiliated. We use 2 partner universities, Sheffield Hallam and Bath Spa. And which university you're with will depend on what subject you do. You won't be expected to go to that university. All the delivery will be remote. What I'm going to do, everyone, is I'm just going to flick through and just try and focus in first on the questions to do with specifically workload. Leon, great question. So out of the classroom, yeah, you will be thinking about marking, lesson planning, and those are probably the two most time things that will take up most of your time. I would say other things might be sort of I think they loosely come into marking and lesson planning, but you know, maybe after you've marked, you might then use the data that you've collected to then inform your planning. So that's something else, like looking at the data, thinking where are the students needing more support? How do I need to change from this? Also, you know, something that a lot of people in their first year really take advantage of, and I think it's really good, is observing other teachers and going around seeing what they do, seeing like, you know, seeing people with lots of different levels of experience and how they are in the classroom. And that's really, really helpful, particularly at the beginning of the year, actually, to see how they're like embedding their routines and setting their expectations with their new classes. Rosie, it would be so helpful to be prepared ahead of going to school to know more info on what is expected of you in regards to the PGCE work and what we can do to ensure we're doing what we can throughout the year to be prepared for this. Yes, in terms of, yes, that will definitely be something that's spoken about at SI. What I usually tell my trainees is to, in terms of that side of it, like I would say it sounds much more scary than it is in reality. And you know, it's the kind of thing that you will just get done because it's a bit means to an end. And I really try and say to people, like, it's really not, in terms of, you know, when you think about your undergraduate degree, it's not the same stresses. It really isn't. Uh, just from a personal example, when I was on the program, if I had an assignment, I would block out maybe like a couple of days in the holiday and just say, right, those 2 days is when I'm doing my assignment, and that's it. And you just get it done. It's also something to consider, is it is pass or fail qualification, which means that, I mean, some people really want to do well on it. I personally, you know, was more motivated just to pass as opposed to getting a really strong pass. So, you know, and there's, you know, in later in your career, no one's looking at your PGCE marks. They just want to know you've got a PGCE. I'm just scrolling through. Isabella and Alice, feel free to jump in if you would like, or if there's anything that I've missed. Please feel
Yeah,
free.
I've just seen one about how do the schools your match will support you. So that will be usually the head teacher or the deputy head will come in and monitor, or your head subject will come and monitor your lessons, or they'll assign certain times for you during the week to say, come in, bring your lesson planning, let's see how you're doing. You do also get given these kits called the Iris kits. I'm sure some of you have already been given them. And those you set up, they're basically like an iPad. You set them up at the back of your classroom and they record you to do your lessons, because then your development lead also checks those. So again, you've got that constant feedback from both the school and from your development lead.
Thanks, Isabella. Yeah, thanks, Rosie. I completely can see why that is something to think about and be prepared to minimize the workload in the holidays. That makes total sense. And I think it's something to maybe ask about at Summer Institute and get more information there. But I think it's quite manageable in terms of that, and I hope that you'll agree.
I think also in regards to looking after your children, it's been quite strict in regards to yourself and making sure, you know, if you want to bring things home, work with your children if you're that kind of person. If you find yourself getting a bit too overwhelmed, do everything at school and then only bring like a few things that you need. But yes, there's online resources. Summer Institute will definitely help you in regards to all of the lesson planning, behavior management, all of those sort of things. So, you know, you will have that, and you will also have, once you've met everybody study at Summer Institute. You know, there's going to be quite a big community of all of you, because at the moment we have over 1,000 people starting this year. So, you know, there's loads of people who are going to be doing the same subject as you in your local area. Reach out to them, ask what they're doing. You know, there's loads of different ways of getting this extra support, especially if you are a parent, because I know that you're kind of balancing multiple things in one go.
Yeah, completely. And I think it also comes down to that communication point as well, and just being really open and honest, particularly with your school, about sort of your limitations. And you can also communicate that with your PGCE, like your tutors as well. What was I going to do? I was going to look at the next question. I'm getting worried I'm not going to be matched to school in time. Is there a time in the summer term? Oh,
Yeah,
where
in
schools are
regards to that,
open?
can I answer that one, Leah?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so in regards to being matched by your school, if there is no chance, which is very unlikely because we've got quite a few vacancies coming through at the moment, it just depends on school paperwork, etc., etc. But if the worst case scenario is we don't, then we do offer an autumn institute start, and we can also then look at starting you for next year. So we will always communicate that with you, especially if you are worried. Talk to your recruiter, make sure they know that you are still worried, and they can then pester. Such as I do this with my school partnership team. I'm constantly emailing them, being like, "Hi, any updates? Please let me know," just to alleviate some of that stress.
Sorry, do you have any advice on being aware about working too much? Yes, I do have advice on that, Leon. I think my advice would be, first of all, be aware that your lesson planning when you first start is going to take you quite a long time. What you can do, what I used to do is say, right, I'm only going to spend half an hour planning this lesson, and I cannot spend any longer planning this lesson. And if it gets to half an hour and you haven't finished it, you have to kind of like just put it aside and come back to it, because, you know, those are processes that will just like, you just pick it up, because if you think about it, when you're on Teach First, you're going to be practicing doing that every single day. A lot of schools now, though, just to kind of like manage any worries about that, is that a lot of schools have a lot of resources. This isn't to say that it's a guarantee. When I went to the school that I did my Teach First in, for example, there were less resources. So I did do quite a lot of making my own. The good thing about when you do need to make resources, though, is that you can keep them forever. So it will save you time. It will save future you some time, if that makes sense. Sorry, let me just think. Are there any common bottlenecks in terms of workload that trainees often face in first year? It's a really good question, Jessica. I think the first term is very overwhelming because it's just a lot of information and a lot of different plates to be spinning. I think it just comes kind of back down to communication and just being kind of organized in terms of knowing where you're at with everything. So just checking in, what things have I got to do here? What things have I got to do there? What PGCE things do I need to do? What, like, you know, what school things have I got to do? And just kind of being you know, in touch about that.
In terms of bottleneck, also your first term you'll bottleneck and your last term you'll bottleneck, because you will be helping your students get to that last little push at the end of term, and that's usually when the students like to have a bit more of a play around with everything, and you're trying to do your PGCE at the same time. So that will be a big bottleneck there. So make sure you've got, like, before those holidays, make sure you've got yourself in the right mindset.
Couldn't agree more. I've so everyone knows, I've just shared the Teach First Parents and Carers Network, which is a Facebook group. I'm not in it, so I can't actually see what like the content of it, but I just thought that might be a good resource to speak to other potential parents and carers who are also on Teach First. I'm also just going to share the networks link as well in the chat, in case anyone wants to have a look through those. There's other ones as well that might, there's a few kind of like faith group ones, there's an LGBTQI plus one, so that might be something people want to look through. There's been a few ones about extracurriculars. My honest advice about extracurriculars would be the enthusiasm is amazing and it's really what schools want to have. Your priority when you first get to school will be just sort of like getting those basics right. So I wouldn't think about it too much, because it will add a lot to your workload in the first year potentially. It's something to really hone in on when you feel more secure in your day-to-day. So once you've got your planning down, once you're more confident in the classroom, and once all of those processes that at first are taking quite a long time, once they become a bit snappier, then is the time to start, doing extracurriculars. And I would say extracurriculars are a good thing to think about, maybe like, for your second year, not necessarily for your first. I could be wrong. Some people might just be so on top of things and be able to do it all. There's obviously no right or wrong, but I think, thinking back to my personal experience, I definitely had too many plates spinning in my first year to be doing anything extracurricular, but I definitely did take stuff on in second year. So yeah, just going to look if there are any other questions we haven't answered, sorry. And it's, if anyone has any last burning thoughts, it's a bit speak now or forever hold your peace. Does the school mentor and your Teach First mentor communicate? Yes, they will a lot. Is there anything we could do between now? So I usually tell my trainees that, well, I work in our early talent team, so all the trainees I work with, or the vast majority, are at university completing their final year. And I always say that is very much the priority. That should be the priority. The only thing that we obviously would love you to do is make sure that all of your tasks are complete, and if there's anything we need from you, just get those done. In terms of preparation, though, I think I wouldn't do anything too intensive. If you're someone that maybe is new to the UK school system, or if you're someone like, so maybe you went to school in a different country, or if you're someone that has been out of school for a very, very long time, like a career changer, then it might be worth getting, see if you can shadow at a school for a day or two. That's quite a good odd thing to do. You can also maybe do some some research into the curriculum, read about kind of like the curriculum, particularly for your subject, is useful. And obviously just general like pedagogy, there's lots out there. But I would say that, and I can see someone's mentioned the SI preparation course that's on Brightspace. That is, yes, definitely, that is something that needs to be done before Summer Institute starts.
The other thing I'll add is when you start your teacher training in September, you are only going to be focusing on Key Stage 3, so that's Year 7, Year 8, Year 9, and Year 10. So there's a lot of resources on YouTube, there's a lot of resources on the government website, so definitely take a look at those. Someone's asked about books. We can't specifically recommend anything because everyone's a different subject. But you'll know that you are Key Stage 3, so just focus in on that one beforehand. And as Leo said, go and shadow in a school if you can. If you're a career changer and you've got children, take a look at their books, or speak to their teachers after school. That's another way that you can do it. Say, I'm going into teaching, any advice? There's, all of those. And then something I usually say to all my career changers, which is a little bit counterproductive, but in August, make sure you take 2 weeks to completely and utterly decompress and reset yourself before you start, because it will be crazy. And Summer Institute will get you there, but take 2 weeks to let yourself relax.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. That is always the thing I say is the most important, to have a proper time off in August. I think is so important, and you will be spending enough time in school. So you don't need to stress in August. We are almost at the end. So I'm just going to see if there's any quick answers I can do. The SI prep course, it depends how quick you work through it. I've been saying between 5 to 10 hours, but it potentially is less than that. So don't allocate too long for it. I think you could do it in a day. Thank you so much, Andrea, for Teach Like a Champion. That's by Doug Lemov, if anyone wants to look at that. A lot of the stuff that Teach First and Summer Institute will focus on is based around that. He's a really interesting educational figure. And yeah, a lot of the techniques are stuff that you'll use. So I definitely look into Doug Lemov. I'll type it in the chat. So you can read about it. The other thing I was
also going to be recommended throughout your PGCE course. They will ask you to quote from it, so definitely get yourself a copy.
The other thing I was going to say was, if you wanted to look at, there's Rosenshine as well. Rosenshine's principles, I believe. Please don't go and like memorize them, because that is so unnecessary. But have a read. Just have a read, start to look. But I think you will need to try and remember that you are going to do a very intense training program in terms of like the preparation Summer Institute. So you a lot of the work is going to get done there. So as long as all the stuff is ticked off, your summer prep course is done, your tasks are done, you know, and you like Isabella said, you relax during August and you're ready for school, and that's all good. So I think as it is 6:59, we will end the session here. Thank you so much for coming on a Tuesday evening. We really so happy to have you here. Appreciate your time. And thank you very much. Have a nice evening and all the best.